So, what are we looking at here? We're looking at fourth canon cases, and we're looking at fourth canon cases that aren't necessarily also first canon cases. 97-12 about the software and calling a hotline is not a case that has anything to do with the first canon. The one about software security does, but only really in an indirect way. So I'm interested in cases that really highlight one's fourth canon duties uh, without the pressure of the first canon. I mean, the classic uh, sort of engineering ethics case is really the first canon, fourth canon dilemma. And you have to think about that. But I think it's important to think about the fourth canon also apart from the first canon. What I hope you watched the other video that I made for today, which is called A Second Look at the NSPE Code. And obviously, if you watched it, what I'm interested in is what is and what is not in there about fourth canon duties, really, and also about what you're supposed to do when there's any violation of the code. I'm about ready to say that the BER is not in harmony with the code when it comes to this. Why? Well, let's look at 09-2 and let's just skip to their conclusion. I mean, you read the case. They cite the relevant one of the relevant parts of the code here. Engineers having knowledge of any alleged violation of the code shall report thereon to appropriate professional bodies and, when relevant, also public authorities. They cite that part of the code, but they don't follow it. That is, what they conclude is not that the engineer has any sort of obligation or duty to report anything. What they say is this: it would be appropriate and ethical for engineer A, et cetera, et cetera. And then they say it would be appropriate and ethical at the end. That appropriate and ethical, saying it would be appropriate and ethical, is saying that the engineer, that it's morally permissible for them to do something, not that it's morally obligatory. And that, does seem to me to be a reasonable conclusion in itself, but it's not what the code says. The code does not say that if an engineer, let's go back. The code does not say in section 2.1.f that it would be appropriate and ethical for engineers having knowledge of any violation of this code to report thereon to professional bodies, etc. They don't say it would be appropriate and ethical. That would be to say that the engineer has the moral right, that it's ethically permissible. What they say is that they shall, which is meaning, I think it can only mean that they have an obligation or duty. So there's a disconnect here between what the BER says and what the code says. I think it's, at this point, having looked at this material for so many years, it's pretty clear that there's a disconnect. And the interesting thing is, what is the source of it? The source is not anything unreasonable. I think the source of it is twofold. On the one hand, they don't want to put more burdens, ethical burdens, on the engineer. And we'll see a case, well, we've already seen cases where that's true. And secondly, they don't want to rustle anybody's feathers when it comes to employers and their relationship with their engineers, or vice versa. Those things, I suppose, are realistic concerns. That is, they don't want to make the relationship between the employed engineer and the employer adversarial, or more adversarial than it is. And that's a reasonable thing, but it may not be either in conformity with the code or in conformity with the demands of the professional. And this really leads to our next reading, Templin's deliberations on the fourth canon, where you really ask the hard question about whether or not you can be an employed professional, or whether to be a professional, you need more autonomy and freedom than you get as an employee of a company.